Hey, what's going on, guys? Kitsune TCG here, back with another video. Today we're going to be looking at one of my all-time personal favorite decks in Swordsoul. And I think Swordsoul is at a really interesting place this upcoming format, being post Photon Hypernova and then post the February 2023 ban list. It has a very good chance of being a top deck, obviously kashtira, and it looks like Brandon is going to be that kind of number 2. It can still fight for a place there. The deck is still very strong. The power level of the game was brought down overall, so you are going to definitely be able to play this deck at a high level and win games. It does definitely require a little bit more for each hand. You do need to trade quite favorably on cards versus kashtira, because that deck will just out-resource grind even a deck like this that does do a very good job of resource management. But it still can do really well, and already post ban list and post Photon Hypernova, we have seen it, top 8 the recent YCS, win a few regionals. So the deck is definitely nothing to just kind of ignore. But just kind of looking at it, this is kind of what I've been just testing, and then from what I've seen, people post from regionals, from the YCS, I'm just kind of editing it there to see what works for me. Right now, 3 Ecclesia is definitely looking like something that, you want to run at 3 versus the 2 kind of prior, just because it can act as a few things for you. So if, you happen to go second, it can act as an additional, special summon. It's a tuner, so you can use it that way if you need to, but it kind of just threatens your board more. And just kind of gives you a few more, different options. So 3, I think, on that is good now. Moe, you're always maxing that out at 3. It's the best normal summon in this deck. It's definitely one of the best normal summons you have in the game right now. 3 for the Long Yun. Again, you want to be maxing this out. It's a free special summon. It's essentially a free level 10 synchro. You have free burn damage. Obviously, you want to be seeing that, and then there's just the 2 Taya. You only need 2 Taya right now. You definitely don't want to be maxing that out, but you don't want to be playing 1 just in case you banish it off of Desires. So 2 is, I'd say, the right number. I think that's pretty much always been the case, but I have seen some people try and play 1. And then you look at the Tinny package, and the Tinny package is fairly standard. It's about what people have been playing. With the 3 Ashuna. Now, 3 Vishudu is kind of up from 1 from what I'm used to playing, and I think a lot of people are usually on 2 of. But I think the 3rd one is pretty valuable here, because that is something that you're actually kind of wanting to draw in this deck, because it does trade favorably. You're able to put the Shengli era back in the extra deck. You're able to put a Fenrir back in hand. So it does have kind of, uses for its effect at this point. Plus, if you're worried about a back row, anything like that, it's worth running 3 now for those reasons. The 2 Adhara don't really need to be maxing out on 3. You're not wanting that effect. If you're kind of going into that effect more than, once or twice, you're not necessarily trading very favorably against a deck like kashtira that can just kind of out-resource grind you, so you don't want to necessarily be seeing that too much. And the 1 Shrihana, still worthy running at 1. Sometimes that'll be something that you definitely can side out for certain games, if you're not really, gonna go that route with a blackout, things like that. So that's kind of the one that, usually you take out, but it is still worth running for when you do go first. From there, you do have the 3 Ash Blossom. This is obviously, can hit some cards. Brandon Fusion. Obviously, with Brandon being back in the game, you want to make sure that they can't go into their plays. And if they're not able to do that, it really does kind of shut them down. And then it also hits things, like Book of Eclipse, which is going to be your Seal Lotta and side decks, and then even main decks like this one is doing here. 3 Emergence. Obviously, any chance you can get to play 3 Rhoda, you want to do it. The 2 Heavenly Dragon Circle, you definitely want to play and see this card, but 3 is probably too much. 1 is obviously too little when you run Desires, so 2 is the right amount there. Obviously, you know, it trades well with Blackout, and also can help you dodge things like Valor and Imperm. So definitely worth running there. Desires, it's just Pot of Greed in this deck. You know, if it's at 3, you play 3. If it's at 2, you play 2. If it's at 1, you know, you play the 1 of. So definitely a very good card there. The One Sacred Summit, now this actually can, you know, extend your plays. You're able, you know, that way to, you know, end on an additional level 8. You know, you can go into like a Dragite. You know, maybe you want to make the, what is his name? The Draco Berserker. That trades really favorably with something like a Fenrir. Able to just banish it, you know, get it out of there if it tries to activate its effect. Or, you know, Crimson Blader is also really good. If you're not able to, say, go for game against something like kashtira, just being able to do, you know, destroy a monster with Crimson Blader, you can lock them out of essentially their whole deck the next turn. So that is a pretty favorable one to run since, you know, level 7s is kind of the meta right now. You do run the 3 Book of Eclipse. That is pretty important. You know, if you go second against, I mean, a lot of decks, it can definitely hit very favorably, but particularly, you know, with kashtira, it's just an easy way, non-targeting, non-destruction, to get rid of your opponent's board. You know, obviously it doesn't destroy them, but, you know, you can basically pick them off at there. They don't usually none too many monsters. The 2 Thrust, you don't need 3, because, you know, if you see it, great. If you don't, you have a lot of other plays you can make, so it's worth running, but you don't need to run more than 2. That's the same reason why you're only playing 1 Talents. You can search it off of Thrust if you draw Thrust. If you draw it, you know, great. If you don't, you know, there are other things you can go into, and it's not even necessarily your only Thrust target. You know, you can grab an Imperm, you can grab the Sacred Summit, you can grab the Blackout, you can even grab Desires if you want, so, or any of like your side deck cards you bring in, so worth having the 1 of in deck if you need it, but, you know, oftentimes it wouldn't need to really run more than 1. And then just kind of rounding it out, the 3 Imperm and then the 1 Blackout. Moving over to the extra deck. You are running the 1 Yazi. Only really ever needed 1. You're not usually often going into the level 7, but it can come up, so definitely still worth having. The 2 Baxia, this is obviously going to be the one that you go into more often. You know, if you can make it off of Taya, you're able to just spin 2 cards back, so it's an easy way to get rid of the 2 monsters that have been, you know, set by Book of Eclipse, and then just kind of go from there. So definitely something, you know, you definitely want to continue to run. The 2 Yugioh, these are obviously going to be one of your main inboards when you're going first. You know, it's a free monster negate, it's a searcher, so definitely something you need in the deck. The 1 Draco Berserker, this obviously does trade favorably in some settings, where, you know, opponent tries to special summon a monster. Its effect just basically says when a monster effect's activated, you can just banish it, so it can prevent them from getting something on board. If they have something on board, it can get rid of it. So it is definitely something good to go into sometimes. Dragite, as long as you have a water monster in grave, you do get a spell trap negate, which, you know, you can make it usually with Moe, so you would have a water in grave, so definitely pretty good there. And if you do run Nibiru, which is, you know, possible for this deck, I just don't have it in this list. I've been kind of testing, you know, having it versus not having it. Then you can even use its effect to balance if you should, you know, excavate one of them. So, you know, a few things that Dragite can do. Crimson Blader, yeah, you know, you can lock your opponent out of level 5 or higher monsters the next turn if it destroys a monster, so if you're not able to push for game, but, you know, you were able to kind of lock them out, it is a pretty good card to run. Chao Feng, this is obviously one of your plays around Nibiru itself. You know, you can go into this, and then they can't Nibiru you anymore, as long as you make it with Baxia. Other things, you know, really kind of one of your only situations that something like that's going to come up. I mean, and you can only really protect yourself against lights, since that's kind of the only thing you're going to be able to make it with. You run 3 level 10s, so we do have the Chixing Long Yu, the Chang Ying, and then the Baron. These are going to be one of your main inboards, you know, as long as you have drawn the Long Yun or added it through however. And then it'll just matter what deck you're going against, like which one's best. Kixing Long Yun hits a lot of decks really well with, being able to banish the spell plus a special summon. Baron can just be good against, some decks just needing an Omni Negate, so really depends on what you're going against as far as which one would be best. And then, you still need your 2 monks. Was running 3, can maybe cut something to run a 3rd one, but I don't think that is hugely important at this point. And then you still do definitely need to run the 1 shaman, and that can just kind of go for game, things like that, bring something back, whatever you need at that point. Sideboard, Lancea does do a really good job of, interacting with your opponent with kashtira, because obviously the main thing that they're wanting to do is banish cards in order to lock out your zones. So if you have Lancea, they're not going to be able to banish cards. Simple as that. You can really just kind of make sure that you're able to play on your turn, and then running things like, the Book of Eclipse, citing in the Dark Rulers, that can help make sure that you turn off any of their monsters at that point. There are a lot of trap-heavy decks at this point, so you definitely want to run some spell trap, interactions. So the 1 Duster and then, the Evenly Match are going to be really there for your Labyrinth matchups or anything that runs a lot of spell traps. Rivalry is also really good. A lot of the decks that you're running into, branded, like Allure and stuff like that, or fairies. A lot of your extra deck monsters are like dragons and things like that. The kashtira deck is just kind of all over the place. You have psychics, they're machines. I think the Rise Heart, I don't remember if that one is like a warrior or psychic. Either way, they're not all one type, so you can definitely kind of lock them into something, whenever they summon it. So Rivalry is definitely a very good card to have there. And like I said, the 3 Evenly, that can also be a really good kashtira card, but also, hits Labyrinth really well. And then lastly, the 3-Dimensional Barrier. This hits every deck well. I mean, hits Swordsoul, obviously. It hits kashtira, limits them out of their XYZ plays. And then it also hits Branded, where they're not able to do any of their fusion plays. So, overall, I think the deck is very good. Like I said, it's definitely not the number 1 deck. It probably isn't even going to be the number 2 deck. But, it's a pretty budget-friendly-esque deck. Obviously, things like Thrust right now are quite pricey, but it's definitely something that you can make for not a whole lot of money and actually, take to a high level. So I've been enjoying it. I'm definitely going to continue playing this. I think this is my deck, this format. And really kind of excited to see how this format plays out for something like this, but definitely gonna keep trying, make some more content, hopefully can do well at some regionals with it. But yeah, let me know down below what y'all are playing this format, if you like Swordsoul, this format, or what you're doing. And yeah, I will see y'all next time.